Can I get a show of hands? How many of you have ever helped a stranger across the road? Okay, that's good. How many of you have ever done a favor without expecting anything in return? Great. Now, think about how you felt after doing those good deeds. Happy? Satisfied? Content? There's actually one word that encompasses all this. It's called Eudaimonia. I know, it sounds like some strange disease, but it's actually the purpose of my life. In an odd turn of events, I in fact discovered Eudaimonia over a chicken curry in Bolivia. Eudaimonia is an ancient Greek word that went out of fashion for a few centuries, but it's making a comeback. It can be broadly defined as experiencing human flourishing, that moment of highest human good. It's similar to the philosophies of mindfulness, where we are encouraged to live in the moment. Its central tenet is that if we could be our best self in each and every moment, we would be more content, satisfied, and fulfilled with our life. That's in contrast to constantly reflecting about the past and worrying about the future. I first came across Eudaimonia when I was a cog in the corporate wheel in America. I went there for engineering, got a good job, had a house, car, a good quality of life. But something was missing, that sense of fulfillment. I questioned, why was I doing what I was doing? Who said that I needed a job, a mortgage, and a retirement plan? What was the purpose of my life? In my quest, I came across a lecture series called Beyond Belief, and they had a session on Eudaimonia, where modern philosophers were espousing that human flourishing should be the purpose of all lives. It's quite a bold claim to state that any one thing could be the purpose of all lives. But the more I learned about it, the more worthwhile a pursuit of life it seemed. But being our best self in each and every moment, was that even possible? Perhaps in a utopian world. But in the real world, we're constantly distracted by our anxieties. Was our income secure? Are we healthy? And even the existential questions such as, how is climate change affecting our lives? With all this in our minds, how could we focus on just being our best self in each and every moment? At this point in my life, in my mid-20s, I had discovered the joys of motorcycle travel and pursued it in all my free time. From my base in Chicago, I explored the western US, Mexico, and even Alaska. On a motorcycle, traveling with lightweight camping gear and tools, there's a constant awareness about security and safety. By traveling exposed on two wheels, the questions at the front of my mind every day were simple. Where was I going to sleep tonight? And did I have enough petrol to reach the next filling station? There was no space in my mind for the usual worries. I loved this immediacy of life. It was allowing me to live in the moment. Not at a level where I was feeling eudaimonic, but it was certainly a precursor. This was around the same time as the financial crisis, and when I also had a gnawing longing to return to India. And with each and every motorcycle trip, I felt I was getting closer to some realization about eudaimonia, but I knew I was not going to find it being stuck in the corporate world. So I took a call and quit my job, sold my house, car, and most other possessions, besides what would fit on my bike, and planned to ride overland from the US to India, however long that took. At the outset, I gave myself 2 years. I researched how feasible extended duration journeys were and saw that some people were actually not cut out for long-term travel and get bored within a few months. They would get homesick and seek any connection to their home culture in these foreign lands. I knew that I wasn't easily going to find connections to Indian culture in the places of the world that I was planning to travel through, namely Latin America and Africa. So I thought to myself, if I could carry a sense of what meant home to me on this trip, then perhaps I wouldn't get homesick. In all the short trips I'd made before leaving on this big trip, the only aspect of my home life that I missed was, strangely enough, cooking. I'd slowly perfected this simple and delicious chicken curry recipe over the years, and I had the urge to cook it right away after coming home from Mexico or Alaska. And so I said, if I could cook this curry once in a while on the road, I wouldn't get homesick. The journey began early March 2010 from Chicago, and when I crossed the first border into Mexico, I knew there was no turning back. I sought out stays with local hosts along the way using various traveling networks, and this opened up a wonderful insight into the places I was traveling through. It was allowing me a local's perspective on things. And as a way to show a gratitude to my hosts, I offered to cook them my curry. Now, this curry is prepared from scratch. There are no ready-made pastes or sauces. It requires a lot of onions, tomatoes, ginger, and garlic. And so I would draft in whoever I was cooking this curry for to help out with the preparation. The first time I made this curry on the road was up in the mountains of San Cristobal in southern Mexico, where the eucalyptus trees grow tall over a picturesque colonial town. Word spread that this Indian guy was cooking a chicken curry, and soon there were 30 people hungry for curry at Jose Luis's farmhouse. I had showed up as a polite guest and now had taken over the kitchen, directing people to chop onions here and dice tomatoes there. The dinner party was a resounding success. And what I noticed was how my relationship with Jose Luis and the others around there changed over the course of that single meal. Before, I was a friendly stranger, but now that I had cooked and fed them, and by their accounts, a foreign delicacy, a bond had been extended, and there was a strong feeling of trust there. The first few times this happened, I felt content in that moment, and just thought of it as happy stomachs talking. But the more I cooked this curry, the more I realized that I could anticipate how my relationship was going to change for the better with any one person before the curry and after the curry. A few months later, in La Paz, Bolivia, Alfonso, an avid motorcyclist, invited me to stay with him, and in due course, I cooked the curry for his family. He was so impressed, he told his friend Gonzalo, who a few days later invited me to cook the curry for his family. I barged into the upscale flat and went straight to the kitchen. Gonzalo's wife, Carmenia, skeptical at this bald Indian biker now cooking up a sensory overload of a curry with chilies and garlic, stood looking over me throughout, complaining that the onions were getting overcooked, or perhaps there was too much garlic. She finally relented, but remained wary of my strange culinary style until we sat down for the meal. She took one bite of that curry and it melted away her cold shoulder. She was blown away at how smooth and complex the flavors were, and I knew I had turned her with my curry diplomacy. She was all smiles and frankly impressed how a man on a motorbike could prepare such a delicacy. I felt I was at my highest self in this moment, experiencing human flourishing, Eudaimonia. I saw this pattern over and over, across cultures and borders, from Argentina to Egypt to Kenya, and even back here in India when I finally arrived. I began to ponder what was happening over this curry that was changing my relationship with people. On the road, in between these curries, I mused on the idea that isn't it a better state of mind to be in where we are around people whom we have deep connections with? Isn't this why most of us enjoy being around our family and friends rather than strangers? This is a good strategy as it helps us be aware of those that could harm us. And this is what got our species this far, thinking ahead about our safety and security. But the downside is, this makes for a cold world. I feel that most people's default mode is to be highly skeptical of each other. And this inhibits us from being the highest versions of ourselves at every moment. Was preparing this chicken curry, as simple as it sounds, fostering deep connections with recently met strangers, and allowing all of us to be at the more desirable state of being around people we trust instead of being skeptical. It might seem a silly thought to arise from spending days on end in the wilderness, but it's not such a crazy idea when I see that people have cooked this curry for just once in some remote corner of the world, still remember that curry, and we've stayed in touch over the years. As I dwelled on the idea on how this curry was creating eudaimonia, I came across another interpretation for the word. It said that eudaimonia can be found at the intersection of what's true, good, and beautiful. Now, those are all subjective terms, but each one of us knows when something is true, good, or beautiful. As I applied this to my curry, I realized that this was my actual recipe for eudaimonia. It was true. As for me and the dinner guests, we prepared this curry from scratch. It was good, as I don't want to brag, but almost everybody who's tasted this curry says it's really quite delicious. The secret is to caramelize the onions and use lots of garlic. And it was beautiful as we prepared this together in a participatory way. That was it. I was able to create eudaimonia in my life and in those around me whenever this chicken curry was prepared. It sounds so simple, but the truth often is. As I shared stories about this curry, people following my journey asked for the recipe. As soon as it went online, friends and strangers reported that when they had prepared this curry, some cooking for the very first time, they were able to experience this sense of human flourishing among themselves and those around them. I had finally found my purpose in life. It was to share true, good, and beautiful moments with others over chicken curry. And that has brought me here today to share that recipe with you. Some think this motorcycle journey was a lifetime achievement, but for me, I feel most content in knowing that I had discovered a recipe for eudaimonia and how I could try and live at the highest version of myself by seeking it out. It's hard to attain consistently, as currently running a startup in India takes up all my day-to-day worries. But having experienced eudaimonia, I know that delivering the highest quality product that is possible each and every day is what will allow me to be content and fulfilled in this challenging world of entrepreneurship. Now, how can you find eudaimonia in your lives? It's actually all around you. You are surrounded by things that are true, good, and beautiful. Just know that when those three ingredients are present, you are experiencing human flourishing, and you have attained a state of being that is higher than simply being happy. If you can, I would implore you to travel, to take a break from your current life path, and let eudaimonia come to you. And you could also seek it out with this recipe. Now, who wants to come over for chicken curry? Thank you. Appreciate it.